I'm not buying any more models. I didn't, okay, fine. I recently picked up these Western Jetbike models for Wild West Exodus but they're Wild West Jetbikes, what more can you ask for? However, the assembly of these models is a little bit odd, and I'd like to go through that today. Therefore, hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and today I'll do exactly that, building these iron horses by Warcradle Wayland. But first, I need to find the instructions, as they are not in or on the box. Rather, there's a note to say check their website. But on the website, there's no sensible menu option for the model kit instructions. Instead, you have to go into one of the factions and select the assembly guide on that page. However, the Iron Horse models that I bought don't go to a single faction, and we'll look at that a bit later on. There are loads of options here, and it took altogether far too long to work out that they are hidden away only under the Union faction. But eventually I did find that, and as a PDF to download, we can finally start building. But I shall be using these models for another purpose, and that will actually show off the kit quite nicely because there is an absolute ton of options in here. Not only that, the sprues are of really good quality, and even the bases have this almost plinth-like look to me, very smart looking things. And whilst I do dislike clear acrylic flight rods, the options for the poses is a nice option to have. To start building, the core part of the Iron Horse for any faction is the same. The two body pieces have a few pips of keying to help them line up. Not sure how necessary that is, with so many attachments that we're about to put on, alignment is really not an issue. The seat goes on top with this big keying hole, and it has a somewhat uncomfortable looking peg as keying for the riders. If you wanted to model them dismounted, this would be really easy to remove, just like a big mould line. There is a back panel to cover the engine, and a front little grille for an air intake. The engines themselves start with a big central jet, and interestingly this takes advantage of the draft angle that is used in injection moulding. The short version of that is that a part with a 90-degree surface would easily get stuck in the mould, but a slight angle will pop straight out, and by making the engine vent match the draft angles on the body, well, not only does it take advantage of the shape that's already there, it sits in place very nicely. The smaller side engines are flat but have a peg and slot for plenty of security when putting these in place. And just in front of those we have some flappy aileron looking things that also serve as footrests, and they just plug into the holes for them, and they do have a little bit of play, and so you could have them steeper or shallower if you want, or even have them at different angles for a model turning. Now once you've got that sorted out, just do it again and you have the core part for any of the bikes. Now I certainly wanted to make an up-armoured variant because it was the coolest one, and I wanted to make the robot rider as well because robot cowboys, that's cool. Well, it turns out that the game actually intends for those to be paired up, and so I started exactly with that. There are several ways that model companies design handlebars and hands for model kits. In this case, you get the hands moulded directly to the handlebars, and that will fit nicely into a triangle keying for exact positioning, and once we get to the rider, the arms just need to line up with where those hands end up. Once the handlebars are in place, the armoured front begins with the headlight piece, and onto the back of that we have this little dashboard, which there are variants of. And to finish up the front, this miniature cowcatcher, which is a very silly and really cool part of this kit, and kind of is an iconic part of how it looks. I started to collect together the rest of the armoured pieces and looked at how they would fit together, and I decided to sub-assemble them to make painting easier. The extra top piece has some attachments for the sides, and then the sides only attach to the cowcatcher by means of the weapons, and the body of the weapons forms the last links of a loop that makes the whole model very sturdy. Moving on to the robot rider, I tacked the torso and hips piece into place on the seat and attached the legs with some thin poly cement. Now I usually prefer thicker cement as it grabs much quicker, but this time I wanted that extra time to let me line up those rests, which wasn't hard at all. If anything, the cement not sticking quickly was the only bit that caused any issue. I left that for a few minutes to set before I broke the tack and finished up the armour, as there is a last piece that goes behind the seat, and I did want to make sure that I could remove the rider with that in place, as again I wanted to sub-assemble the bikes for painting. At some point I realised I'd forgotten the rider's head, so that went on, looking straight ahead, and whilst I did leave out a few bits from the intended build, I think it looks just fine without them, and I'm not using this model for its intended game anyway. Speaking of some minor kit bashing, with the first jet bike done, I moved on to the second, going with the opposite headlight and dashboard to make things a bit interesting. And for the second rider, I picked out the lady biker with her hair blowing in the wind, as it was the most dynamic westerny looking one. This time the legs attached together and the torso fits on top, and all with keying so it lines up perfectly, and I line the arms up with the hands on the handlebar as before. For this second one I really wanted to go with a more rough and ready civilian bike than the heavy duty armoured one I made first, and I felt even the cowcatcher was a bit too heavy duty for what I was after, and so to cover the attachment point I used an animal skull from a different kit, which will look suitably Wild West. And well, that's it. For the second bike I went with a very minimal set of options, and that's going to fit the aesthetic I had in mind really well, I think. And would you look at all the spare parts you get? The kit includes 5 different rider options, and you get 2 full kits as you're intended to make 2 of the same. So after building your 2, you get 8 spare riders with different heads, a host of weapons, dashboard headlights and other gubbins, as well as the armour pieces if you didn't use those. There is for sure going to be some builds with this lot sometime in my near future. But for now, those are the models built, 2 totally different ways and 2 very different looks, to suit what I had wanted. But there are so many other options and combinations here to have fun with as well. If you'd like to see what they look like with some colour on them, check back in next week, as I will hopefully get around to do a painting video by then. And for now, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.